Now, as far as respect and civility towards one another, understanding one's adversary should prompt a better reaction, which will then include respect and civility, particularly if the police now are aware that they are dealing with nonviolent activists. Violence then should not be an issue or be anticipated, and action by them should not be based then on a false assumption that violence will erupt at any minute or there'll be damage to the public safety. Police should recognize that in our American democracy it is expected as a common courtesy, in the absence of imminent danger, that one should clearly identify oneself and state his or her orders and respond to the natural and reasonable reaction of citizens to ask why an order is being implemented. Discussion between adult human beings could be the last chance to remove false assumptions and overreactive conclusions, which could extend to excessive force. So negotiation is paramount. But it's interesting to see how these suggestions could easily be also applied at higher levels, even international concerns, which would result in removing conflict between nations. If only we would negotiate, but instead we don't do that. We simply jump to an action that quite often we don't understand ourselves. The rights of American citizens under the Constitution are couched in an effort to perpetuate human dignity in governmental relations. But it should be noted that police in non-democratic countries routinely issue orders to citizens without adequate explanation and quickly follow up with forceful detention and arrest. Recent events in Colorado Springs on St. Patrick's Day and at a Los Angeles immigration rally on May the 1st indicate that we are continuing to use these undemocratic methods here in our allegedly democratic country. New revelations about Kent State also underline this. So, developing a relationship not based on hostility and false assumptions about peacemaking in general, a fundamental human right, is a beginning. People have asked why, when the words peace or protest are used, they seem to suggest the greatest threat to public safety. Yet we know the law breaking that is that violent habitual criminality based on motive and values of malice and egoism, and is sometimes unregulated so that legal permissiveness prevails legally, particularly where weapons are concerned. I mean, Virginia Tech is a great example of how we allow people legally to commit crimes without being regulated and then concentrate on so-called protesters and demonstrators who are practicing their constitutional rights as the greatest threat to this democracy after 9/11. To counter this, good policies and practices must be formed and enforced as part of a general plan. That develops a relationship, and these would include the following recommendations. 1, implement clarification of existing policies and set better guidelines on public events, which may be applied to subsidize private events using public property, as well as any pro-peace, anti-war event. You can't hide the Constitution under a claim that an action is simply private when it's out in public. That doesn't make any sense. 2, conduct ongoing discussion between police, media, civil liberties, and peacemaking groups. 3, establish a Citizens Public Safety Review Board. 4, present a public training course for police, media, and peace activists and other interested citizens together or separately on the philosophy and practice of nonviolent activism, so for once and for all we can learn what this is all about. I intend to give a course at the Justice and Peace Commission in mid-September, open to the public on this subject. 5, hold a town hall meeting where the public participants are the center of the discussion and not simply the listeners. 6, in regard to specific conflicts, adopt specific rules for relating to nonviolent activists in nonviolent demonstrations, rallies, or even simply pro-peace celebrations, which exclude chokeholds, pressure points, submission holds, dragging on streets, threatened or actual use of tasers, particularly where there is no public safety dangers existing. Have respect for people who are obviously elderly, infirm, or very young. Completely investigate what is taking place at the scene, independent of any hearsay characterization of the conflict before taking precipitous action. And don't take such action. Ensure that police officers provide an identification and explanation when confronting an alleged demonstrator, so that the constitutional requirement of clear understanding of the order and the reason behind it are part of the process. That's their right, our right, everyone's right. Clearly explain to people who are there under color of law, permit holders, the issues at hand. Avoid orders based only on technical terminology that may be misrepresented, such as private versus public location justification. And how about giving 3 verbal warnings before any action is taken against peaceful, nonviolent persons? Issue public investigative reports in a timely manner and dismiss charges quickly after misapplication of force and violation of rights is obvious, rather than extending the period, which has happened here in Colorado Springs many times, the period between arrest and trial to hours before the trial in order to harass arrestees or to stand by police in a false gesture of patriotism. If these 3 characteristics are used and the suggested recommendations are implemented to resolve the issues between public safety officials and peace activists regarding constitutional rights, which usually involve the 1st, 4th, 9th, and 14th Amendments, misunderstandings will be reduced in the future, and the winners will not only be police and peace activists, but the spirit and practice of constitutional democracy, which will also be restored to where it once was, when it was the hope of the world and admired by all. We're not doing this anymore. Americans are not admired by all anymore, and there isn't much admiration going on locally in these kind of events that affect us right where we live. So there's a lot of work to be done. It's an uphill fight, and let's start it sooner rather than later.